What's going on? We back here, Can Jones, iTechnicallyKan Power BI series, tutorial number 5. We getting into visualizations. So up to this point, it was getting you connected. It was setting up our data model. It was going in there, making a couple of measures, just testing the data out, making sure everything is set how it's supposed to be set. Now we're going to get into actually pulling in a couple of visuals, adding some data, and seeing it. So here I'm gonna go ahead and get started with opening up a new tab. And what we're gonna start out with here is getting a bar chart. Now you can find this over in the build pane. You can also pick from the home ribbon here. You can also grab visuals and insert them from here. There's also the insert menu, and you'll see that I don't know why I said menu like that, but the visuals here, you can use this drop down to select it. So a couple of different ways. If you don't have them here off to the right, there's usually menu option to view. So if I were to collapse these different ones here off to the right, I could go ahead and expand the build pane, format, bookmarks, and so on. And then I can use this plus sign here to add some more. Now I will note, as I've talked about, depending on what version of Power BI you have, sometimes the navigation of things switch up in some of the updates. So if it's slightly different, don't freak out. It may not be you. It may be the software. So I'm gonna go ahead and collapse a few of these for right now. Actually, I want to make sure that I pull out my build and my format. All right, so here on the canvas, we're gonna go ahead and from the visuals, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna just go with stacked bar chart. Now you got a couple of options here, your stacked bar chart, clustered bar chart, and this 100% stacked bar chart. I'm just going with the stacked here, and each of them works slightly different. This one's gonna be just good for just comparing basic values. This is for sure the best. I think, let me not say the best. Nothing is the best. Everything is a case by case situation, but this is good when you've got a couple of different categories and you just want to see how they're performing, specifically when it has to do with, money or account. So with that, I'm gonna go ahead, resize this out a little bit, and I'm gonna pull it down here to the bottom. We're gonna end up with a bar chart, and then we're also gonna do a time series chart here also. So with this bar chart, one of the things you wanna make sure that, if I might have mentioned it in the previous tutorial, make sure before you're adding your values that the visual is selected. I'm going to show you two ways. Again, multiple ways how to do a single thing. Now, I can come over here to my right hand pane. I didn't have my data tab, so I clicked it, got that back open. Now I can pull over items from here. So what I'm actually going to pull into this is our product categories. So I'm going to expand product category, click on category name. That's going to bring it in. Of course, nothing's really popped up outside of these titles right here. Now we're going to actually get some values placed in here. So I'm going to go ahead and expand. Where did I do it? In sales data combined. And if you remember from the last tutorial, we created a couple of measures, and those are noted by the calculator that you see just off to the right. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and bring in the total sales. So I put a check mark next to that. Now, everything that I just did right there, I'm going to hit a Control Z. If you notice when I select this visual, I hit that Control Z twice too to get rid of both of those fields. Right here can get you the same thing. If I click on this top one, right, this lightning bolt in these bars, if I give that a click, I can add the data from right here. So I could have clicked onto this y-axis, hit add data, came here, what did I get? Product categories, brought in category name. So you see that pops up there. And then I can come, come down to my x-axis, click that add data, and then span my sales data combined. And I'm going to bring in total sales. So again, multiple ways to do things within Power BI's interface, some just faster, just depending, I guess, on your flow. You can pick the one that works for you. I'm going to go ahead and get this out of here right quick. So here I'm able to see that I've got bikes, my revenue, a landslide. Total sales, they are what is keeping this company afloat clearly. We've got accessories here, and notice when I hover over this little pop-up right here is called a tooltip, and you can format tooltips in some really cool ways. Everything from this basic situation here onto creating a dedicated page, so when you hover over this, you know, it could pop up and have pictures of bikes and some other fancy stuff, or again, just the data. And we're going to do some formatting on that, excuse me, here in a bit. And that's kind of what the focus of this activity is going to be around, is just some of the edits that you can make to a visual. Once you do bring it in, you're not really bound to just stick with this basic setup. So we're going to go into some of it. Of course, not going to cover all of the things you can do, but some stuff to get you started. So one of the things that I do want to set up here is get some values showing here. And all this can be done from the format pane. You can see here. Now you can also access, if you see the little paintbrush here, if I click plus on that, it shows you some options, not all of the options, but it gives you a few options that you could add to this from here. But I'm going to click more options, which just highlights this format bar here, or pane. And we'll make a couple of changes here. I'm going to expand title. And then I'm going to update this to total sales by category. I'm going to remove that name. So, and then I'll hit enter. I'll leave the text size about where it's at, but I am going to align that title to the center here. Now you have options. Of course, you can change the font size. If I wanted to, you know, boost that up, make it stand out a bit more, I can up that. I just put it up to 16-point font. The text color could change. You can change the background of that text. From here, I'm going to actually collapse this down. Now, you see here off to this left-hand side, we got this category name right here. And that's our y-axis. We don't need that there. We have a title here. But if needed, you could update this as, for whatever reason, it needed to be specifically pointed out. But here we got our context: bikes, accessories, clothing. It's total sales by category. Context is there. All right, so we've got that set up. I'm going to go ahead and collapse that y-axis. And I'm going to expand X, and I'm going to go ahead and, let me see, what do I want to do here? We do want to leave the values. I'm going to get that title off of there. We don't necessarily need that either. Again, this is explaining that this is total sales by category. You can go ahead and collapse that. Now you got the option, you can remove grid lines. Not going to worry about that, but you could expand this, change those grid lines, remove them, make them different type of grid lines. Now this zoom slider currently off. Sometimes you'll have data set up in a way that you may want to zoom super far in on something, and that comes in handy at times where, you know, I guess it could technically be utilized here, being that there's such a landslide in the values of bikes between clothing and bike. It's a big range, so if you needed to have the ability to zoom in, you could do that with that zoom slider. Not really needed in this instance. All right, one of the things I do want to do is turn on data labels. So I'm going to expand or click that, and I'm also going to click the drop down here. Now you see at the end of these bars, we've got 24 million, 1 million, 0 million. I'm actually going to expand this a little bit further, so it shows that that's 0.9 and 0.4 million. Now with your data labels, you have options. If you haven't noticed yet, when you click these drop downs, there's usually more options embedded within each of these different format areas. So make it a habit to recollapse. When you expand something and you make your changes to one of these sections, recollapse, just so it doesn't, it just makes it neater and cleaner and easier to not end up somewhere that you don't want to be, making edits that you don't want to make. All right, so let me see what I want to do here. I'm going to expand value. There we go. So this field is going to relate to these numbers we see here, showing the values. So what I want to do, let me see, I'm going to kick these up a bit in size. That works. 12 works. All right, we can change the color if we wanted, make it bold or whatever. We're good there. Let me see the display units. Those are fine, but you do have the option. Right now it's set to auto, so Power BI is like, hey, I think this is going to represent it the best. You can change that to none, and it's going to give you the full value written out. And that's going to be dollars and cents. I'm going to just go back to auto. We're dealing in the millions. That's fine. You can also change the decimal place. So here by default, it's 23.6. So we only got one decimal place here. We could go ahead and, if we wanted 2 for whatever reason, we could change that to 2. But I'm going to go ahead. I'll just put it back to 1. Just set that there. There we go. All right. Let me see the other. Nope. That'll be fine as it is. Oh yeah, you do have the option. So I guess that's a good thing to point out. The position right here under options. You see how this popped in to the inside of this bar, whereas these are hanging out. You can change that position outside in, and it forces it to stay on that outside in versus moving around depending on how wide or short that you make this visual here. So with that, let me see. I think that might be good. All right. So then what we're going to do is now we're going to get a time series set up here. Let me actually make sure I got my notes there. Yep. So we're going to do a line chart. So that's going to just show you the sales trend over time. The line chart is going to show you sales trend over time. We're going to get use our year field, and then we're going to get the values, and it's going to be showing us what's happening over time. So with that, I want to make sure that I've got my bar chart here deselected. And then I'm going to come into the build pane, and I'm going to go ahead and add in this line chart. I'm going to bring it just to the right. There we go. All right, so now we're going to add our fields. We want to start with adding from the calendar lookup table. We're going to go ahead and bring in the date field. Bring that date field in. And then what we're going to bring in from our sales data combined is the year to date sales. All right. So now we can see it's looking here. If we hover over our tooltip, it'll give us for each of those dates that we've got. Seems like these sales tend to drop off in January and get moving through the year. So that's like a quick visual way to kind of sum up, like the sales is happening further along in the year we go, the more sales are happening. A lot of, I'm sure, Christmas bikes happening. All right. I'm going to go ahead and make a couple of format changes here. So I'm going to select this, our line trend, our trend line, our line chart. Stumbling through that. So with this selected, I'm going to go ahead and come into my format pane, expand that title. And then I'm just going to go and rename this year to date sales. I'm going to go ahead and center this up. And I think I made 16-point font was what I use here on the total sales by category title. So I'm going to just get that to match up. Go ahead and collapse. There we go. All right, I'm going to expand my x-axis. And here, go ahead and get title removed. There we go. And then let me make sure, go ahead to the x-axis, remove that title. And I guess I could update this to, call this year-to-date sales by date, but YTD has date in the name. Now, if I was doing something like, let's say, for instance, I wanted to change this date and wanted to make this month, right? And it was going month, but there's not a year slicer. It makes more sense using the date. But if I was changing it to, wanted to just see a month for a specific year, I can go through and set this up so that the title says year to date sales per month. But again, not doing that. All right, let me get this up out of here. All right, so now we've got two visuals sat here, so we're able to see total sales by category broken down with these couple of different bars here, value showing at the end. Here we've got our year-to-date sales showing us just the trend line that's happening. Now, I'm going to reselect this, and there are more things that we could do to this visual right here. One of them being, I'm going to see the data label. We could throw that on. Makes it a little clunky to me. I feel like with something like this, you can kind of just look over and check that out. But you can also turn this trend line on and kind of just see when the trend is, what the trend is happening. It's trending upwards. The sales keep getting higher and higher by year. And you can also format those as needed. So what else we want to do, something else we want to do here is get some slicers, right? So that we can slice this by year. We're also going to set this up so that we're able to slice by region. And then what is the other that I said I was going to put into this? The product category. So that way we can kind of drill into this a little bit based on what a user's need is. They can say, hey, I just want to look at this for the year 2020. I want to look at this specific category in this specific region. And we'll give them the ability to do that with a slicer. So to add a slicer, I'm going to head up to the visuals. I'm going to find slicers. Now there's a few different options for a slicer depending in the version of Power BI desktop that you have. I'm just going with the plain old OG slicer. Give that a click. I can go ahead and format this down a bit to know it's not going to need all of that. And we'll start here with our year field from the calendar lookup. So from the calendar lookup, clicking on year. Now when it populates, it's putting it here. There's a few different formatting options that you have in terms of how the slicer shows up. Right here is an in-between, which is good if you want to see, okay, between this year and this year, you can do that. But I like to use drop down. So with this selected, what I'm going to do is head over to the format pane. And now one of the things to keep in mind, a few settings, when you have your selection, there's going to be different settings within each visual. So if you look here, you don't see as many as we saw for the line chart or the bar chart. But I'm going to expand that slicer header, and I'm actually I'm going to go up to slicer settings first, and I'm going to change from this style from between. I'm going to put it as a drop down. And now if I come here and I click that, it's going to drop down, and I can put it back up. So again, it makes things nice and neat to me, kind of keeping it with the clean aesthetic. Now back over in the options area, I do want to expand slicer header, and what I want to do is update the title text in that for that slicer to year selection. All right, and you could also say select year, but I like year selection. All right, size is good there, size is good there. Of course, you can put borders around it. You can add a background. I don't have any background for it. It's good as it is. Let me see. Ba-ba-da-bam. Yeah. So from that drop down, now if I were to click on 2020, it's just showing me the total sales by category for that year, which I'm getting bikes. If I go to 2021, so it looks like they only sold bikes in 2020. 2021, we've got all the categories showing, and again, our trend line showing what's happening there from January through December. Same thing for 2022. I guess 2020 was an anomaly in general for most businesses. I'm going to go ahead and deselect, and that'll put me back to all. All right, so now we want to make those slicers for the other two fields. So instead of starting from scratch, what we can do is just copy this year selection slider and then add, remove the year field and then add the field that we need. So I'm going to select this slicer. You got a couple of ways to do this. You can right click on it, go to copy visual. And then if you right click and hit paste, it's going to drop that down. So I'm going to grab this and drag this just right under a little bit. There we go. Now over in the build pane, and I could also do this, actually, I'm going to do it from here. I'm going to click on this add data to the visual, and I'm going to X that year filled out. And then what I'm going to be grabbing from here is territory lookup. From the territory lookup, I'm going to bring in region. And then what I'm going to want to do, of course, is format this so that it says region selection versus year selection. So I'm going to come into the format pane, expand my slicer header, and I'll go ahead and update this to region. All right, move that down just a little bit. Now I'm going to Control C, Control V, so I can make a third copy of this. And this time, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of region. I'm going to click on Add Data. And what do I get? Product Categories. So I'm going to go to Product Categories, expand that, and click on Category Name. And then I'll just come right over to the format pane. It's still on with the last visual that we updated. It's still showing those options, so it made it easy for us. I'm going to go ahead and delete region and update this with category. And now if I wanted, because you see how this kind of just blends into the background, one of the things that we can do here is get this background so that it's a little shaded. You can bring in pictures. Some people create templates in like a PowerPoint, Photoshop, Canva, things like that. They'll create a basic template, because one of the things when it comes to creating your reports and dashboards, you kind of want to go into it with a general idea of how you want that data laid out, how you want the information laid out. And with that, you can kind of build your background template so that you've got, you know, spaces that may have a specific type of shading on the bottom, and it might have some, you know, like rounded shapes that, I said rounded shapes, like rounded rectangles that some of the information is going to go on. We're actually going to utilize some for the next when we bring in these cards, but you could do all that, upload it, have it against the backdrop, and place all these things there. But for now, what we're going to do is come over to the format pane with no visual selected, so that we're actually working with the canvas. So I'm going to drop down on this canvas background. I'm going to click on color. I'm going to just make this like a light gray. Now, if you look here, if we're looking here, nothing has changed. And that's because by default, the transparency is set to 100. Not sure why they do that, but I'm going to just drag this down. Drag it down. Let's see, maybe 15. There we go. So now we got some separation here, right? All right, so I'm gonna check these slicers. I'm gonna go 2021. I'm gonna say United Kingdom and bikes. So now we got to drill down. We got to see, okay, how many bikes were sold in the United Kingdom in 2021? And we'd be able to say, or what were the total sales for bikes? Not how many, but total sales, 1.2 million, right? And we're able to see the information here also in a real granular way. All right, so working as needed, I'll go ahead and hit this clear selections. And I guess I should point that out. If you hover over and you see this little eraser here, that'll get you back to a square one, which will be showing information for all. All right, so let's go ahead and add us a couple of cards here. We're actually going to end up creating a couple of more measures, but to get the party started, we're going to head over to the build pane, and there is a card here. If we go ahead and give that a click, I'm going to resize this just a little bit. And what we're actually going to bring into this card, we're going to bring in the total sales. I'm going to click on total sales. So we brought in the total sales measure. So that's saying, okay, total sales, 24.91 million. And that's for all the years that have been covered here. If I went and changed this to just a specific year, you see that that updates. All right. So another thing that we want to do is we're going to set up a couple of measures here. We're going to set up a measure so that we're able to look at the total orders made, along with, what else did I put? Total orders and the total returns. So that way we'll have these high level cards set up and they'll be able to quickly take in, these are the sales, right? These are the amount of orders and these are the amount of returns that we saw for any given year or all years. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. Let's get started with creating those measures. So I'm going to click on that measure. I went back home, and then, and actually, I'm jumping ahead because I didn't make a dedicated measures table. So I do want to make sure that where I'm creating this, I've got that table selected so that that measure home table is where I want it to be. So with this, we're going to go ahead and we've got our total sales, so we're going to get total order set up here. So we're going to go ahead, let me grab my note here. There we go. And then here, I'm going to click on new measure. And basically what we're doing, we're saying total orders. So that's going to be the name of this measure. Total orders equals, remember that's how we start our formula. If you hold down shift and hit enter, that's going to jump you down to that next line. And one of the things we're going to start out with is this function distinct count. And we're using distinct count, so we're making sure that when we pull in, it does the count when it counts what we're about to pull in, which is going to be our order number field. We want to make sure that it is not doubling up anywhere. It's only getting this distinct value. So if there happens to be an order that has multiple items, line items, it's not adding up multiple times. So with that, we're going to go ahead and bring in our order number field. So if I start keying in order, I see from that sales data combined order number. I'm going to close out that parenthesis there. And, actually something I'm going to point out something here. So the way that I formatted this, yes, it's fine. It will work fine. But when you look at DAX, you're going to start seeing the way that programmers or people creating the DAX formulas who have been working with DAX for a while typically will set things up similar to how coding goes so that it's easier to kind of tell what's happening. And one of the things that you can do or you want to start doing is when you use a function like I did here, distinct count, open in parenthesis, holding down shift, hitting enter, which is going to drop it down to that next line. And then I'm going to go ahead and kick that closing parenthesis down to the next line, which would be that fourth line here. Now, do you have to do this? No, but it just helps other people come in to look at your code later that might have a background in coding, programming, kind of understand the flow of what's going on. So, and it isn't as important when we only, have a simple formula like this, but sometimes you'll get, 20, 30 lines and you want to make sure things are nested how they're supposed to be. And it's easy to look at and see, oh, this is nested within this other function that we're calling on and so on. So keep all that in mind. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. And the other one that we're going to create is going to be for the return. So what I want to do is make sure I've got my returns data table selected here. So that way when we create this new measure, it's going to be in the correct home table. All right, so what we're going to do here for this total returns, we're going to go ahead and call it total returns. If I can type, there we go, equals, return, enter, and then I'm going to go ahead and this time we're going count, and we're just doing count. We don't need distinct on this one. I'm going to hit enter. And then what we're going to bring is the return quantity, because we just wanted to count the amount of returns. So again, our total returns is just going to count all the rows that there's a return quantity. I hit enter there. All right. And now I see my total returns here. I see my total orders here. And then what we'll do is we're going to grab this here and we're going to format this really quick to make it easier for when we bring in these next ones. So what I want to do first is with this card selected, I'm going to get rid of that background. So I'm going to expand the call out, or nope, sorry. what am I doing? Size and style is what we're looking for here. And I'm going to uncheck that background. So therefore it's clear here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to head up to the insert pane here, ribbon. Trying to get better at saying the names, the actual names for things, just so it works. I'm used to saying certain things certain ways in my head and got to make sure I'm speaking to the peoples. So with that, you've got some options here for things that can be imported into a visual outside of just the visuals. And I've said imported into the visuals, imported to this canvas. So you've got some AI visuals, talk about those later on. Power Platform stuff. You can get paginated reports, which are similar to like crystal reports and just a basic report that doesn't have the visual. It's more number-based situation. With that, here we've got shapes. What I'm going to do is click on that drop-down arrow, and I'm going to grab this rounded rectangle. And it's going to come in really big. So I'm going to bring this over here, get formatted down, and I'm going to place that over. Of course, right now it's in front of. So what I'm going to do is select with this selected. I've got the option. Nope. If I come up to the format pane, I can choose to send backwards. All right. And I can spend a moment, get that right where I want to be. Now, as it looks here, not a big fan of how this is, sitting, and it's that black on top of that blue, not that visually pleasing. So it'll make the most sense to go ahead and change the color on this text. So I want to make sure that I've got, all right, my call out there, my card selected. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to collapse and then expand. Let's see, I'll do the category label also, but go with call out value. I'm going to change this color by clicking on color. I'll just make that white. Same thing for total sales in the category label. There we go. So now that's showing up a lot better against that blue backdrop. Now, you don't have to stick with these colors. These are your default blues. One of the cool things in that insert tab, where is it at? If I select one of these, nope, it's the view tab. I was off. You can change and choose to, I just clicked on themes, this accessible title. And you see it made it a dark blue. I actually like this a little better, so I'm actually leave that. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and let me see how I want to do this. Actually, I'm going to group these, right? So one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to bring these sidebars in. That way I can select both. And sometimes with the formatting, it's a little wonky. See how when I selected both of these, the text and disappeared. It's like it put it behind there. Sometimes even after deselecting, the text won't pop back up, and you've got to like click off and then click back on, and it'll be there. But with both of those selected, if I right click, I can go to group. And I can put these in a group. I can group these together. So when I move, I'm not just moving one part of this. I can move the text that we see here, the values, and that background. So if I click group here in that format pane, all the way to the right, you can add the selection and it'll bring it in here. But with this, with the group selected, you do have options here as far as your size and style. So you can change the height, width, and so on from that pane. But here in the selection, it's showing me here. Now I've got this grouping here. If I hit this drop down, you'll see I've got the card and then the shape. So I can select those, make changes as needed. So I can, this is say total sales card. Maybe I spelled that correctly. Let's go. All right. Now this, when you're doing some of the simple visuals, this may not be necessary right here, but as you get to adding some more complexity and you're bringing in a lot of elements to your report or dashboard, this can help just keep things nice and tidy. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and select that total sales card, Control C, Control V. So now I've got a copy of it. Now want to get this updated for total orders. So with this selected, I'm going to go ahead and X out of that total fields, and then I'm going to come down to my total orders measure. Bam. Now it's showing me 25K. And if I wanted, I could select, get that. There we go. That total orders, go into my format, and I can go my call out value, bump that up to 1, so 25.2K, just a little bit more granularity showing you what's going on. All right, so let's get the last one for the returns. I'm going to Control C, Control V. Got that total sales. I'm going to go ahead and remove that, and then from the returns data, get that total returns there. All right. So now if we check this out, go ahead, 2020, 2021. All right. Give this a save. Now you notice that the total returns did not change when I was just clicking on that. That lets me know something is not right. Something isn't connected when it comes to the return. So I'm going to check into the model view and see what might be going on. Let me see. So if I look here, I can see that my returns data is connected to my territory and my product, but it's not connected to the calendar. So I need to grab that return date, drag that on up to the date field. That relationship is being created. Click Save. Mini side is the returns data, which is just what we want it to be. And then our calendar lookup is the one side. So now if we go back into report view, I'm going to give this a save. Now when we change this year, we're seeing those returns change as they need to. So that's something to keep in mind when you're working with your data. Sometimes it's just a simple oversight, didn't make a connection, but when you're flicking through and looking at the data and you're using slicers and different filter values and things aren't updating as they should be, go take a look back at your model. All right, we make sure we got this saved up. Let me think. I'm gonna, let me see. Trying to think of what from here. Now, let's say I'm gonna leave them where those are at. Maybe, and of course, there's a lot of ways. I'm trying to think in real time of like some other formats. Let's say we need to actually update this down here at the bottom of this page. We're gonna call this sales overview. And we'll get some context. Now, if I brought these down just a little bit here, if I wanted, I could add a title. So I can go back up to Insert, choose to grab a text box. All right. What I will say, the text boxes be kind of funky working with sometimes in terms of getting the drag. I'm going to just say sales overview report. I'm going to select all that text, center it up. I'm going to go ahead and kick this up to like 24-point font, make it bold. Also don't want that white backdrop. So with that selected, I'm going to come to the format, expand size and style, cut that on off. Perfect. Let's see if I can actually drag this over. I always have a hell of a time trying to actually get this grabbed. Now I'm using this, I moved it over until I saw that little red line going down the center. So that let me know that it's in the center. Now there is the options with the format. Let me see, for the align. So I could align this to the middle. Oh, nope, that was the wrong one. I didn't mean align emitter. I meant align center, and that'll get me centered up. I can go ahead and make that a bit smaller. Try that again. There we go. So now that's got it in the middle of the report based on the size of that object. You see when I made it smaller, even though the text didn't change, the size of that object changed, and it got you here to the center. Now again, this ain't the prettiest, but it's a working. We've got some slicers to be able to slice our data. We've got our couple of visuals here, created a couple of new measures, and then we ended up displaying those measures. So somebody looking at this report can quickly see, okay, the total sales over all 3 years, 24 million, almost 25 million. The total orders over that time, 25,000. and then a little over 1,800 as far as returns over 3 years. So with that, we are wrapping up this part of the tutorial series. Next up, we're going to dig a little bit more into working with these visualizations and getting into creating things like bookmarks and so on to be able to navigate between pages and so on. So stay tuned. We're coming back. We're doing it again. Thank you all for rocking with me. It's been another one. iTechnicallyKan fam, and I'm out.